should be better. Yes, it is better. Welcome. With I can see that Windows likes to change my USB devices very often. Welcome, friends. Thanks for joining. And if you're watching on YouTube, when you're recording, welcome and thank you for watching. My name is Jerome from Uno Platform. I spend about an hour every week taking a look at issues from the Uno Platform and discussing the news and development in general when that happens. And this week we're going to take a look at two issues. Oh, and I see McNitz is here. Welcome. Thanks for joining, as always. We're going to take a look at two issues. The first one is the InvariantCulture support. That's specifically for WebAssembly for Skia targets, where in some cases it's easier for when you're running from frame buffer, for instance, on the embedded devices to have a less important footprint, and then you want to not have a libICU integrated in there. So having a smaller, having the ability to use the InvariantCulture disabled would be of interest. And the second one is taking a look, if we have time, to at an X-bind issue where Xload doesn't work properly in some cases. So I'm going to try to figure those two out. I see Baskin is here. Bonjour. I see that, so last week we were talking about linker issues with .NET 9. Some of those were, we actually ended up having to fix them early. So this is something that is of interest when building for .NET 9. Lots of things have been moving in that direction, particularly with the use of native AOT. This is something that we've been working on to get to support everywhere, and .NET 9 has been improving that scenario. That's something that we want to make sure that we want to make sure that runs properly for all your apps. So without linker warnings, that's the important part. Good. So let's take a look at this particular issue. So we're talking about support for InvariantCulture mode. So the issue here is that when you're building an application, you can set the system globalization invariant here, and this is an option that you set directly when you're building your app. So I don't know if we have the option here that's defined, but we can take a look somewhere else. I think it's called invariant. I think it's a feature. There's probably somewhere. No, that is talking about the InvariantCulture. That's not what we want to use here. Maybe in this build property. Find that one. Globalization config settings. Maybe that's the one. Runtime config MS build property. There you go. So it's called invariant globalization. So if you set that to false, to true, sorry, it will force the runtime to run in invariant mode, and it will stop using anything that's related to the support for a globalization, and specifically libICU. And so if you're on Linux, this is something that will cause trouble if you don't have libICU installed. So we're going to try to build for that specifically. So let's create a new app, and then we're going to try to reproduce the behavior using a simple app. We're going to use .NET 9. We're not going to use any of the other targets. We're just going to use the desktop one because it's the specific target. We're gonna try to do it with WebAssembly as well, maybe in a separate try afterwards, just to make sure that we have that properly set up. And let's see what we can get. Okay, so we want to have invariant globalization set as a MS build property here, and we want to start the app and see what happens. So first we're gonna try on desktop and see if it fails. My guess is that it will, because we're going to be trying to use features that don't that are not supported. Okay, there you go. So that fails, which is expected. So we're going to try to figure out if we can change that to build something different. So in here it fails because of application languages, where we're trying to find support for generate culture. So into InvariantCulture, and maybe there's no way to there is no way to get that. So we're gonna change the way Uno builds for this. Okay, so we need to change the target of the Uno SDK here. So to do that, we're going to move to dev version of the SDK. And as I shown last time, we're gonna move to the private SDK. The private SDK is only to be used when you're developing Uno features. So when you're a contributor to Uno, you want to use that. And to search for this, we're going to go to NuGet Package Explorer, and we're going to search for that Uno SDK private, the latest version of that SDK private. So it would be the 561. Oh, selection doesn't pick up everything. Okay. So we get the 5.5. So this is the SDK private, and we need to change SDK private as well to go at the top here. So that's the first. Yes, it is documented. So the use of the SDK private, it's in the documentation for Uno. So if you go to the docs, I think we published that recently. So if you go to reference contributing here, and you get building Uno, and I think we have somewhere in there that explains debugging Uno instead of another app. And I think we have Uno private SDK somewhere in there. If it's not, maybe the PR wasn't merged, but no, there it is. So you replace Uno SDK references to Uno SDK references to an SDK private, so that it allows to select the right binaries more easily. So there we go. We have SDK private here. We have SDK private at that location. Uno detects that, and then you restart Visual Studio so that it will pick up the right version. Now, once you're done with this, you take that version number and go back to the Uno sources, and then you can override. You can open the NuGet override file. That file is located in the SRC folder. Nope. The scrolling went too fast and I clicked the wrong folder. So if you go to the SRC folder, there's a cross-targeting sample file that you can copy over to cross-targeting override file. Then you need to change the Uno to get override version so that it will override the right target when you're debugging Uno. Now, where we want to debug using net9, that's what is selected. So we have net9 here, and we wanted to select, we want to debug Skia. So we're going to go and debug that version. So in here, what we're going to do is when we're going to be building our own version of Uno, we're going to be overriding that version that's coming from the NuGet cache that's using 56952. And is not super useful here. Yeah, so it's not an upcoming feature. It really is a standard feature that we're using. So the reason we're doing this for that SDK private is that Uno is a collection of NuGet packages, and the Uno SDK sources by themselves are in the Uno repository. The problem is that because we have other packages that need to be aggregated there, we cannot build the Uno SDK inside of Uno because it needs different versions to be set. So we're recreating the Uno SDK package from the Uno SDK private inside of the templates repository, and that templates repository just picks up all the versions that we have in Uno platforms that you can see here. All the packages that are there, they're all coming from the Uno SDK package. The thing is that if you're building for Uno SDK private, those versions are not the right ones. They're probably outdated in some cases, but that's okay. We're just building for that. If you want to update those versions, you can change them, but you have to do it manually using the different versions that are specified in the NuGet package. For instance, if you take a look here, I think there's no, the README file is not specified in that one. So if you go in the Uno SDK package, you're going to see in the README file that there are all those versions that you can change, but those are up to date because they're in the Uno SDK. In the Uno SDK private, they're not up to date, so that they need to be updated manually if need be when you're building your app. Okay, so now that we have our version here, we're going to be building Uno specifically for that target. I think I have a bit too much of logging here. Let me disable that, otherwise it's going to take too long. I probably will need to cancel the build, otherwise it will take too long. Okay. I see more people coming in. Thank you for joining. We're talking about supporting InvariantCulture for Skia desktop apps to make sure that they can run on the devices that do not have support for libICU, for instance, particularly interesting on Linux. So we're building Uno, a custom version of Uno, so that we can troubleshoot instead of a separate app that has the feature enabled. And we set the invariant globalization feature at that location to ensure that we're going to set that right. So this is a runtime feature, and that's particularly interesting because if we want to do validation of this, it's not necessarily easy to do inside of the current tooling that we have inside of the Uno CI. So that's probably meaning that we're going to have some different QA steps that's going to have to enable that feature and validate that it actually works properly, and avoid additional issues when we're releasing updates to everything here. The thing is that doesn't fail at compile time. I mean, it kind of works properly, so that's a problem. Probably going to have to introduce that kind of additional support inside of our CI just to make sure that we're going to be building for this. So yeah, that's the thing. Adding a runtime test is a bit difficult because it's kind of a global feature. So we would need to have the application to restart with that feature enabled and built specifically for that. So I'm not sure we're going to be able to do that as a runtime test, unfortunately. I mean, not at this time. Maybe we'll end up doing it after a while. Okay, so now that we have a build that's succeeded, that means that if we start the app, we should be, if we start rebuild, maybe just the build should be enough. Yeah, the details have been updated, so that should be enough. So let's see where that failed. So we should be seeing the sources at the right places. Okay, so we can see here that it's using the right path. So it's using sources on my local disk. So that means that we're going to be able to make changes to this particular class to see what kind of changes that we can make. Okay, so if we go back to Uno and we take a look at that file, we can take what's been mentioned by Youssef here, saying that we can get a Boolean config here to determine if the .NET globalization invariant is set properly. We have an environment variable that may provide that information, but there's probably another way to get that. There's the app context here. Yeah, that would be interesting. So that's coming from the .NET runtime, so we can probably just pick that up. Okay, so there's two ways to set that. You can set it from the command line using the environment variable, but you can also set it from the outside. Now, the interesting thing is, and I'm not too sure where that code is coming from. I wonder if if you're setting the environment variable that way, if it's going to set the Boolean config as well. Doesn't feel like it is. Let's go look it up. I think I cloned the runtime last week. May have that somewhere in there. No, I didn't clone the runtime, so let me do that. It's going to be easier to search. We're going to clone the .NET runtime so that we can look it up. And I do have this. That's probably going to be enough there. Okay, so we got that .NET. Oh, probably missed. Probably used the wrong URL. Did I? Probably did. Yeah, that's the one. Okay. Okay, so it's a bigger, it's a big repo, so it's going to take a few seconds to clone. Okay, so the first thing that we can do, so take the specific code and just copy it over to Uno and see how we can adjust for that support. Okay, maybe not at the full end. Okay, so we would get that Boolean config. So, oh, this is coming from the runtime. So they don't have, they have that luxury of doing things that way. But let's figure, we're going to be using just the config here directly, and we're going to see if we can have that differently. Okay, so we have I'm sorry, your username is difficult to pronounce, but what's the best way to make my UI navigation? Currently, I have a dashboard page with a content control used to change its content to different pages. It's a nav bar button at the top. Obviously, it's not the best way to do this. Well, there are multiple ways for sure. There's the very basic way is by using a frame. You use the navigation view, so that's really the base, super base thing. But then you can use the Uno navigation also to do this. And there are other pieces like the Prism navigation that also can do that kind of navigation. So there's multiple ways to do it depending on what you're looking for. But you know, there we have a lot of documentation around Uno navigation. If you search inside of Uno, particularly in extensions here, there's Uno navigation, so you can get started with navigation and have that already set up for your app. Okay, so now I think we have the runtime there. Let's try to find if there's that specific system globalization. Let's see if they use it directly or if they have something else. Okay, so they're using it at multiple locations. They're using it at culture info. That would be a good location. That would be a good location. So let's see. I get culture info. That's tests, so not super useful. Globalization mode. They have string invariant. Okay, so it's used in different locations. So this is probably used for iOS because it's an .m file. It's used in WASI in some cases. It's using globalization mode. Using settings, so globalization mode and settings. But this is using something that is called a app context config helper. But they're using good Boolean config, but that's probably not what we're looking for here. So we can't really access that. That's too bad. Or is it? It's probably not useful directly. So this is internal. Okay, so they're basically rereading the file every time, but they're actually no, they're using it as a as a setting in globalization mode, that's not something that we can use. So we're going to have to repeat. We're going to have to repeat the same thing. Oh, that's too bad. Okay, unless there's something that shows that somewhere, but doesn't look like it. Look at the environment here. We get to different cultures. No, it doesn't look like there's a way to do it. Okay, so we're gonna just read the environment directly for now. We're just gonna be using that first portion, and that should be enough just at least to determine if we can go further along, if we need to read the environment variable entirely. Okay, so we're gonna put that in the an internal boolean. Culture and default value. It's looking for a default value, and in our case, it's going to be false because we want to not use the InvariantCulture most of the time. Now the issue was located where we were trying to create a new culture info that was using a culture that was not the right one. So in that case, there are two ways. Either we're going to be trying to create multiple cultures here, but that won't work. Actually wondering if, it's probably failing here first, and then it's going through something that tries to create the culture. We probably should be just returning, if we're in InvariantCulture, we don't do anything of the rest. It doesn't matter that much. Also, why are we doing this? It's because we're calling set culture and we're calling apply culture. Maybe we should be not modifying it at that location and just not call create culture altogether. So set culture is called at multiple locations. We do not have any culture set. Okay, I'm not too sure exactly where all of this going. So we're going to be just building the app that way, and we're going to take a look at why we're getting to that location. Because when we started the app earlier, I didn't determine why we would get in that context. So let's figure this out first. And we're going to skip the whole code that uses the culture info creation altogether. Okay, so we just need to wait for Uno UI Skia and a few others to build properly so that they get copied at the right places. And then once we get to runtime test when you're building, you don't need to wait for the end for the whole thing to build. Otherwise, it's just not useful. Okay, so we get that. Okay, so let's wait a bit more. So we were inside of the get primary language or apply culture. So apply culture is called from primary language. So probably we're calling it using something that already exists. Okay, so we're at remote control.skia, so we're good at that point. Okay, so let's figure out where all of this is coming. It's not rebuilding, so let's make sure that we're making a small modification here so that we are using the latest sources. Okay, and we're getting to the breakpoint very soon. Visual Studio is not helping me there. Not sure why. That's new. Maybe it's a preview issue. Who knows? Okay, let's do it again. So that was, I'm not remember which one that was. I think it was 23. I don't remember. No, or maybe I did open that one. Maybe it could be that one. Not sure. I closed it too fast, so I don't remember which one I created. No, that's not the one. No, that's probably going to be on this. That's 23. Okay. Okay, let's try again. Okay, not failing this time. Good. So when it fails, it's coming from apply culture, from set culture. It's trying to set ENUS. And this one is coming from because there's a language defined as part of most likely the default languages. And this is defined by, that I'm not sure. This is supposed to be defined by apply languages. This is defined by the default localization. So this is not something that we can change, or that we need to change at that point, because it's going to be specifying this. Though it may be that we need to enforce that the application culture that's defined here is using the always ENUS, or at least the default culture. So the primary language override won't be defined here. So we need to change the apply culture to say that if we're using InvariantCulture, then we don't do anything, and then we're going to be setting just set culture, but we're going to be using the InvariantCulture from culture info. Now the thing is that with InvariantCulture, there are a few things that are not necessarily possible to do. So it's the 3-letter ISO name. That would be enough. Actually, I'm not even sure if that's going to be enough, but let's see. I see a few more people have joined. We're taking a look at culture info, InvariantCulture support for Skia Desktop. Try to figure out if there's a way for us to change the way culture is managed inside of Uno, so that we don't fail when running an application that has that mode enabled. We're just going to see if that is not failing when we're running it. So there are a few things that we could be changing when we're building Uno, because at this point, what we're doing is when there's a change inside of any of the underlying projects, where we're building all the projects that are coming from that are dependents, and we may be able to not do that to improve the build scenario, particularly with the reference assemblies. But there's a chain of dependencies that may be a bit odd in that context. So sometimes we need to change this to still build in the dependencies. So let's say you're building a sample app and just modifying, let's say, the foundation assembly, and there are 3 assemblies in between. And none of those in the middle should change if the reference assembly doesn't change. But sometimes it's still needed, and it's not clear why, at least not that we could find. So probably could take a look at that again to try to improve that build. Maybe it could be another live stream if some of you are interested. So is it failing? So I press F11, so that's probably not useful. Okay, so the only InvariantCulture is the InvariantCulture is supported. So okay, so that culture is not super useful. Okay, so it's setting the wrong one, and I can't use it. You can't use IVL here. Okay, let's see if we remove that altogether, what happens if we just plain and simple just return from here. Let's see if we have other issues that arise because we're not applying any of the cultures. We may need to change the set culture here to have one that actually uses the culture info, because creating one that's coming from nothing, from the actual InvariantCulture is not working, so we can't create an InvariantCulture, a culture info from an InvariantCulture string. So we're gonna have to manage that. Okay, so I made the change so that we can return directly. I wonder if I can change, because the thing is that we're modifying always the same assembly. And so there's a message that shows up at the end of the build for that one to say where it should be overridden. Maybe there's a way to change the location of that file. So it's put inside of unoskia here. So if I change to the order of the build, maybe we're going to see where that one is built. So overriding, it's not set here. Yeah, it's not super visible. Okay, not super useful. We're going to have to just go through the pain of rebuilding most of it for now. Okay, so let's rebuild. Otherwise, we're going to take a look at what we can change just to rebuild that one, because it's taking too long. I don't want to make you wait for nothing during the stream. Okay, so it says pretty much the same thing. Oh, or is it? Okay, so it goes further along, but it's still failing because of the set current language, but it's not failing at startup, which is better, but not enough. So let's go take a look at this. We're gonna restart again, and but this time with the exceptions. We're gonna stop on all the exceptions and see what we're calling. Okay, so we're calling set culture language. So it looks like we had support for it. We were saying if we're an invariant, if the current language is invariant, then we force the invariant culture, but using the English culture as a result. So that's good to some extent, because it says that we start the application using the invariant culture, which is the default for the current UI culture. So we don't want to force a specific culture, but if we're using the invariant culture, we need to not do that at all, and use invariant instead, and actually not do any of this. So we're going to be showing something, as we're going to be showing an error message in that case. Okay, so for that, we're going to be doing the same thing here. As it was in apply culture for apply languages. No, it was not here. It was in application, application.skia.cs. So completely another place. Okay, so in here, we need to use application languages InvariantCulture. So that one is somewhere else. And so if it's not invariant, we're going to be executing that block. Otherwise, we're going to log it. We have a logger somewhere in there. Not really. Okay. We're going to use info for that. We're going to use. Not sure. Let's go for debug for now. Invariant mode is enabled. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, what we can try to do is, try to use some control that is using cultures and see how it behaves. My assumption is that if you're trying to do things that are not using the proper culture, it's going to fail pretty spectacularly. So, that may be interesting. You can just build that one and see if we can change something in there. Oh, that was application. Oh, well, I still have to build. I still have to build the whole app. So we're going to be building just to keep the that specific part. So we're going to be making changes to the app and see if we can get to some culture-specific applications, some culture-specific controls like calendar or time picker to see how it behaves. I know that if you're trying to get some of the pieces that are coming from the InvariantCulture, like currency or current date and time and things like that, it kind of behaves curiously. So we're gonna be seeing what that does at that point. Okay, so let's rebuild. You need to rebuild at that point because Visual Studio may not be able to detect that we've changed the UNO binaries behind. So that's why I need to rebuild every time, then press F5. But otherwise, if you're in a standard app, there's no need to do that. Okay, so well, this is expected because it's the hot reload tooling. And okay, so do we have any exceptions showing up that is related to? Okay, no, nothing. Okay, so there we go. So now at that point, what we can do is we're just going to add a let's say calendar view. And culture info. Okay, so it's definitely doing things that are not compatible with current culture, with InvariantCulture. So you can see that we're inside of the calendar view. So there may be something that will cause trouble there. So there may be features that you're going to try to use as part of UNO that will not work because it's not supposed to be doing anything. But as an experiment, we're just going to try to see if we can just use whatever is available at that point. So to see if it actually shows anything. It's probably not going to fail the app entirely. Yeah, it doesn't show anything. That's pretty much what I figured. Okay, so let's try to see if we change that that culture info here to something else, if it actually works. So we're at line 82, and we're going to be changing that to use just the current culture. So instead of that, we're going to say application languages, InvariantCulture, And we're going to do InvariantCulture. Otherwise use the culture that's been defined by the original set of languages. That one I'm not too sure where it's coming from. Oh yeah, it's using application languages. That makes sense. The thing is that it's a set of strings, so we can't really create a culture info from that, but we're gonna see. Maybe you can alter this language's property so that it returns the right set of cultures that we can still create. So maybe we can create an invariant culture from an invariant culture string. I'm gonna try that. That would simplify a lot of things all around. We can actually try that very quickly in here. So if we do actually no, it's probably gonna fail because I'm not gonna be fast enough at writing the code. So let's wait for the build to finish. Actually, no, let just pass that level for Uno UI. So I don't see anything related to overrides here, but it's probably something that is has changed somewhere somehow, or maybe it doesn't override because it doesn't build anything. That could be, yeah, build acceleration is enabled, so that's why it's not building anything. Okay, so now we have our new file. Let's rebuild. And we're going to see if adding our calendar is actually helping or not. So my calendar is still here because I modified the calendar here, so that is good enough when we're starting the app. Let's see if it fails. Okay, so it's still trying to create a culture lookup here. So that may not be good enough. Okay, so let's take a look at our culture info and see if we can just change the list of languages. Culture info. Okay, Since is not happy with me here. Using the right things. Okay. I'm going to try it differently from the main page. Okay, so we're supposed to be doing culture info. So we're going to use current culture, and then I'm not too sure which one that would be. Maybe let's try with the IETF language tag. Okay, so I need to put that in front of our initialized component, otherwise it's going to fail. And okay, so that works. So if I use nothing, it will create a invariant culture. I would have thought that you could use an actual complete tag, but it doesn't look like it. So it doesn't say it's neutral culture, interestingly. Has invariant culture name. Is there a way to determine that? So there's a 3-letter ISO language name that I would have thought that would work, but that doesn't. So if we have the 2-letter ISO language name, does that one? Does that work? 2-letter. Oh, I think that's the one that I used a little bit before, and that didn't work. So it's failing when you're executing it. Okay, so that's not helpful. So probably the only way to create it is to use the empty string. I would have thought that no neutral culture would be similar to invariant, but that's not the case. So that's different. Okay, so that means that when we're in application languages, we're going to have to return an empty string instead of anything else. Okay, so let's roll back the changes in the datetime formatter. And in application languages, we're going to change the list of languages to say that we're going to be creating it using an empty string because it's the default culture. So we said that if we're in InvariantCulture here, we changed that differently. So we're going to have to ensure that that list that is defined here is the right one. So pretty much a list of strings with only one string that has that is empty, so that it defines the fact that it's InvariantCulture. Okay, so the only location where it is set is from this location, and it's coming from apply languages. And apply languages is called from either globalization preferences or manifest languages. So manifest languages is something that is coming from, what is it coming from? Get manifest languages. And this is coming from something that we read from our manifest that defines which languages can be used. Okay, so in that case, we're not going to be using anything that is defined like the primary language override and things like that. We're just going to be returning an empty string if we're in a globalization invariant mode. InvariantCulture. I don't think we're setting anything else. We're just setting the language here. So we're just going to do that should be enough. Okay, so this is a new feature that's coming from C#, C# 13. This is the auto initialization of arrays, and you can see that this looks like an array, but it's assigned to an read-only list anyways. That's pretty cool. So it's the compiler is automatically generating the right type for the target. So that's pretty cool. It's probably generating an list of some kind and then casting it to read-only list. But in that case, it's easy for me just to do an array of an empty string. I think it's an empty string, but I didn't take a look closely. I don't know if it's an empty string or if it's just a space. I would tend to think that it's an empty string, but we'll see. Okay, we're at UnoSkia has been built, and then we're building UnoSkia. Okay, so my assumption here is that because we're specifying it here as an empty string, everything else that uses new culture info from a string will work because it will be able to just create the invariant culture. Now, what I don't know is that if there are parts of culture info that will fail if we're using invariant culture. I know that in recent versions of, I think in SMS test, the cultures changed, the default culture changed from whatever version culture that you're using as part of the system that runs to the invariant culture. And we'll see if that has any impact. So let's rebuild the app. So pick up the latest changes. So it looks like at that pace, it's been 50 minutes. At that pace, I don't think we're going to be taking a look at Xload, but who knows? Great. So now we have the culture info that's empty. It works, so it's not failing, so that's good. And does it continue starting? It does. Okay, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Okay, so it shows the calendar, and it looks like the invariant culture is English, because otherwise it wouldn't show anything. So that's pretty nice. Okay, let's try with another one, for instance. do we have, let's see, time picker. I do a time picker that what does show. A time picker added at the bottom. Okay, so it looks like it's using the right content. And if I set it to be, I don't remember which one that is for the picker. I don't remember. Do any of you remember the property to change the AM PM? I don't remember at the top of my head. Let's take a look. So it is 12-hour clock that is set using clock identifier, and clock identifier is a property, and clock identifier is supposed to be set to I don't know, 12-hour clock. Okay, so if we set that to 12-hour clock, what happens? Was clock identifier. Oh, well, there you go. Okay, well, it changes to AM PM. Okay, so by default, it looks like it's working because it's using the right, it's using some kind of default culture that makes sense. I don't know if there are other parts of Uno that are using culture, intensely. I think there's the number formatter, which can be used by the up-down number box, that can use currency formatting, but that, what you can see, doesn't change anything. Let's go take a look at the sources from Uno to see if we can have something. The culture info is used. I search for a new culture. If we keep everything here, we get application languages, daytime formatter, languages for languages here. Maybe we can search for application languages to see if there's a location in Uno that actually uses application languages. So we can skip the test, they're not useful. Okay, so we got calendar view. We've got maps to some extent, but it's not super useful. Okay, so there are not that many that are using that feature. So it should be good. So by the look of the change that I made, it looks like it's the only change that will be needed here. So just not return anything up. So making sure, so in application languages. So the only change that I made, well, aside from having something that reads the Boolean switch, is mainly to have a language list that is an empty string that will define the fact that we're in InvariantCulture. So it doesn't mean that it won't fail for anything else, but at least in that case we have something that's of interest. Okay, well, that's good. That looks fine so far, because there aren't any other location that are making active uses of languages or culture info aside from the calendar date picker or calendar view and time picker. Both are running properly, at least for Skia. So that's going to be an easy fix. That's great. Good. Okay, so we're done for the first one. Now we can go take a look at a second issue. And our second issue will be two-way xbind and xload. So for this issue, the problem is that we have this sample, And in this sample, we have a piece of code that will basically have some text below the elements that are in a list view, the navigation view, and the text that is below is data bound using xbind. And what that means is that let me unload that so that we can take a look directly. Well, it looks like I had already one that looked like this. Oh, I do have that. So, okay, so let's restart from scratch. Okay. So let's go take a look at that specific feature and why it may fail. Okay, so the issue here is that we have a navigation view that has menu items. So a menu item template that's data bound to whatever items that are defined somewhere in the app. And inside there's inside the item template, there's an image, two font icons that are bound or whatnot, depending on the visibility. And then there's an xload here at the end that is supposed to be showing and hiding the item, so the text block when the item is selected or not. So let's run the app, and you can see you'll see the issue. And so I don't know which version that's using, but it's using 5.4. Okay, so that's pretty old. I'm wondering if it actually, because I didn't take a look at the fact that it was using an old version of Uno. So let's upgrade to the latest version, so because it may have been fixed. And we're searching for something that is not an issue anymore. Okay. This is something that we added in recent versions. So when you're changing the Uno SDK, it tells you that you need to reload Visual Studio. This is a amazing feature, because if you try to build, the fact that the SDK has changed, Visual Studio won't detect anything. It will make some weird error messages. So you're going to click that button, and then it will restart Visual Studio just as it was, using the same solution and everything else. That's a lot faster than it used to be before. Okay, so let's see. If I start the app again, I'm starting to wonder if if it would be fixed. So if it's fixed, that would be the fastest validation of bugs during a live stream, from my point of view at least. We'll see. Okay, so the problem originally was the fact that when we navigate to different items here, so you can see that the text is disabled or hidden when you're moving from one target to another. And then, yeah, you see, so the text is staying up. So when you click, the first time it shows up, then that works. But then afterwards, it never goes away. So that means that there's a binding error. So the fix for this is actually pretty easy. You just need to use visibility instead. And there's an automatic binding that will transform the boolean here to a visibility enumerable. And then the feature is going to work properly in that case. So if I click here, the text is actually showing up the right way. So technically, that workaround for that particular bug is better, because you don't want to use xload to hide content, in such a way. The reason for this is that when you're using xload, it unloads the control from the visual tree and loads it back. So it puts a strain on the UI for no good reason, and you can just create the item directly and just load and load it directly to make it easier. So yeah, that is probably the right way to fix it, but that's not the best way, in terms of, because we still have an issue underlying. an underlying issue. Now the problem is that Xload is supposed to be loading and unloading the control, but in that case it's not doing it. So what we can do is just determine that. So we know the selected binding is working. So that's actually it's actually true. What we don't know is does Xload do its work properly? So to do that, we're going to be diving into the code generator and go take a look at what was generated for that specific portion. So we can probably go take a look at that, but I'm not too sure if it's going to be readable or not. But so we have the main page generation here, and we're going to try to find that expression, but I'm not too sure if we're going to find the right one. Okay, so we have a binding here that is associated to a text block that is inside of an element stub. So an element stub is a portion of the UI that kind of wraps controls that are defined as part of an Xload, and that's what allows that is what allows Uno to load and unload control based on the status of the binding that was defined here. Now it looks like for some reason the xbind is not reevaluated multiple times. That may be why it happens. So we're going to have to figure that one out. Do you have so there's a question. So do you have an idea why my xbind item source binding doesn't show in my WASM UI? Works everywhere else, but not in browser WASM. So generally it's not xbind. It's probably depending on the control. So depending on what control you're using, can you tell which control you're using? So now we're gonna just put a breakpoint in there, just for the evaluation. And there's the evaluation here for the xbind. So is global, and then it's using true or false. That's actually quite interesting because it's not evaluating anything here. It's just using true and false. That's wrong. That's clearly wrong. It's not even using anything that is coming from the original expression. Okay, so we could probably simplify this to be a different sample. So the important part here is that Xload here should be using equals and xFalse and everything, but for some reason the generated code is just false or true. So the false is probably based on the default value, because it means that if you have so it's trying to find that the data context is actually a square navigation view item. So if it is, then it can return whatever the expression should be. Otherwise, it returns false, which is the default value of the type of the target. So in our case, it's a visibility, but that can be converted from an xbind. So maybe that's the issue. So he tried using items repeater and items control with both binding and xbind. Okay, I'm not sure what could be wrong here, but if you can provide a sample, just make sure that if you're using xbind, that you're setting it to be a one-way binding, because otherwise it's going to be a one-time binding. It may fail as a result. So just make sure that that you're setting it this way. Okay, so the problem looks like it is that we're probably using the binding here. So let's try a different way. So if we were just remove the equals, what is generated instead? So it doesn't say true, but probably going to have to reopen the file. Okay. Still setting it to true. Okay, so it's not regenerating anything. So probably honestly, I can just give you the whole repository with a key, and since there are some APIs inside. Well, no, that's the thing. So we tend to not work with full applications, just mainly because it's we don't know about your application, so we may end up debugging your application, not the issue that you're having. So it's probably best if you trim it down. The best way to do this is to take a look at the documentation that we have. Let me find that for you. So if you search for how to create a repro, you're going to find a way to get all the steps that are needed to create the app, and just pick the portions that you have, and making sure that you have that. You've sent 2 discussions already. Oh, well, then you're good. See if you have done a repro, then we'll be able to take a look. So if we don't have the time, maybe we'll take a look at it next week and see how we can fix it. Okay, so we still have the build here. So let me just rebuild it quickly. That's why it was taking a while. Oh boy. Visual Studio did not like that I opened the options at the same time. No, okay, so just it was just taking a bit of time. Okay, so I'm setting that to minimal. So if I go back to my file and I search the foreground again, it's still true and false. That's very curious. There's definitely something that is wrong, because it's not supposed to be, it's supposed to be binding itself to selected, or it's because I'm not looking at the right thing. Ah, that's right. I'm not looking at the right thing. So that's the binding that's defined here. Okay, that binding is selected. Okay, so that's defined here. My apologies. I was looking at the wrong location. So if I put the equals back, I'm not sure. Okay, equals false. Okay, so it's regenerating the right thing, and it's using equals false, so that, okay, so that's generating the right context, and it's good. So the problem here would be that we're not invalidating the control for some reason. And I would have assumed that we would data bind to it again the right way. And I think we do have tests for that in Uno, and when we're unloading controls using xbind. So maybe it's because we're inside of a data template. Could be. Let's go take a look. I think we have that in. We have some xbind tests somewhere in there. We have xload binds, xload tests. Okay, so there's one. Visibility xload, while loading, we have loading binding. Xload visibility, no, it's not. Okay, so we have xload true, false. That helps. So it's supposed to be working because our tests are working. So that would be the guess here. So if I take a look at xload, xbind, so we have the controls here, xload, xbind. So we have an xload, xbind. Where's that one? Xload, xbind. Why don't I see it? Xload, xbind. Where's that control? Oh, at the end. I'm blind. Okay, so the binding is done directly on is checked. Okay, so we have an xload binding here, and if we go take a look at the generated source, does it look like the one that we have in the sample? So we're searching for xload, xbind. That's the last one, and we're searching for the load border. I'm not too sure where to look. We should be looking at load border. Okay, so that's the one that we're looking for. Okay, so load border here. is inside of an element stub that we can see at that location. And then we should be having a set binding that is applied here. That is using drag an instance, and it's true false. Ooh, wow, that one's complex. So it's binding to X load. There's the bind result. Ooh, that one is a bit complex. Okay, so we have an instance. We have a try get instance for X bind 2, which is the bind result. Okay, so let's see what that one does. Okay, so it's trying to read X load from here. It's trying to read S load from here, from the context, but for some reason the other one on the other side is not doing it, is not reading that. And so we were looking at the element stub, so the original one, and then the inside, the binding that's inside. Is it using the same thing? Yes, it is. Okay. So for some reason, we have that method that is supposed to be generated, but in our context, it's not. It's just setting it to true. And we're in one way, it's supposed to be doing the right thing, but for some reason, it's not running the right content. So maybe it's because it's inside a data template, but I'm not sure. Okay, so that's it. We'll continue looking at that specific issue next week and see if we can find a way to figure out if it is caused by a data template or not. So until then, oh, there's a question. Should runtime tests be added to each runtime platform test? Nope. No, it's automatically built for every platform. So you don't need to do anything. You may need to exclude it from some platforms because sometimes you may be using internal APIs and WinUI is not going to like it. But otherwise, you could just add it once and it's going to be available everywhere. So that's it. Thanks, everyone. Until next week, happy coding. Bye for now.